Reverend Spy by D P Denton, Chapter 13. Good evening, sir. We are happy to have you at our prayer meeting this night. And Dan shook hands with the stranger at the door of his church. Well, I am happy to be here, came the reply, and at the sound of that voice, Dan almost dropped his Bible. He was surely glad that there was no one else very close right then, for he could not hide his surprise. 35 was so completely disguised that Dan had no idea that it was he until he spoke. Glancing about and seeing that no one else was close or watching, he asked anxiously, "What brings you to our service tonight?" "My name is Jones," said 35, and Dan never did know but what it was. "I am planning a trip to Washington soon. I have a friend there who is very anxious to meet a certain preacher from this town, and I am wondering if you would like to go with me." 35 had spoken quietly and confidentially, as though getting some advice from the pastor. "Is that an order?" smiled Dan, as he pondered the possibilities of such a trip and what it would mean to meet the head of the bureau. "Just about that," said Mr. Jones, alias 35. "Mr. Big feels that he must meet you and spend some time with you, and since the shooting is over, he doesn't want to wait too long. He is arranging a meeting of church leaders at the department building soon, and he thought this would give you a good excuse and also make it possible for you to visit his office without anyone becoming suspicious. You see, 21 plus, even though the war is over, you are going to have to be careful for a long time yet, maybe the rest of your life. So even for you to visit the bureau, we will have to have some kind of cover for it. The date of the meeting with the ministers will be in the papers. You watch them and take your cue from that. Make your plans to go. Your expenses will be ready for you, and you will be covered at all times. When you get to the bureau building, mingle with the other preachers until you get your directions." Then, as another worshiper entered the vestibule, he extended his hand and said clearly, "Well, Reverend, I am sure that the service tonight will mean a lot to me," and proceeded into the sanctuary and found a seat. It was a good service, with the Lord blessing a number of the folk, and with some good, clear, ringing testimonies, plus 2 or 3 good seasons of prayer. Dan's Bible lesson was short and to the point, and he saw that 35 was listening as though he had never heard anything like that before. Silently, Dan prayed for his friend and longed to see him surrender his heart completely to the Lord. Then, as an inward chuckle, he wondered if a man could get saved while traveling under an alias. He knew, though, that the Lord understood. At the close of the service, 35, alias Mr. Jones, gripped his hand tightly and said so that all around could hear him, "Reverend, that message was just what I needed. From now on, I am going to obey the Lord and try to make him a good servant." And Dan thought that he saw a trace of a tear in his eyes as he went out the door. There was a church in the general area of Washington which had wanted Dan for some services for some time, so Dan made contact with them and arranged to visit them at some future date. He knew that he would need some reason for going in that direction. Then he made preparation for a trip away from home and wondered what he would meet when he visited Mr. Big in his offices. To say that he was not nervous over the prospect would not be honest. He was. He had long admired the man and his work for our nation's security, yet the thought of having a private conference with one of such stature made him almost shiver. However, he made preparations to go when the time should arrive. He did not have long to wait. The newspapers carried the story of the impending meeting of church leaders in Washington, along with a statement that one meeting would be at the office of the Bureau. Dan noted the time and other details and contacted the church in that area with the dates when he would be with them. Once again he left Lori and the boys to preach at a distant place, but also to do something for his country, this time different from the other tasks that had been his. Dan planned his arrival in Washington so that he would not have to stay overnight, but could go directly from the station to the Bureau building. Upon alighting from the cab, he was surprised to be approached by 35 himself, who acted very formal and offered to guide him through the building. Inside, they found numerous church leaders from over the nation, some of whom Dan recognized, and some who seemed to recognize him. After a time of mingling with them, so that no one would think he had any other purpose, he noticed 35 moving down a narrow hallway, and he followed. A feeling of excitement came over him as he realized that the moment had finally come when he was about to meet Mr. Big and give his personal report of his activities. Through a maze of halls, rooms, and watching eyes they proceeded, then up an elevator which showed clearly that it was not for public use, past several men whom Dan knew had to be guards, and then finally they stood in the anteroom of Mr. Big's office. "We have orders to come right on in," 35 said, and without waiting pushed his way into the private office. Dan's nervousness had given way more to curiosity than anything else, but now he stood in the office of the man whom he had admired for many years for his devotion to America and its protection. The big man arose from behind the desk, came around it, and made directly for Dan. In this fleeting moment, the preacher was struck with the fact that he looked pretty much as he had been pictured, and Dan was sure that he could be a formidable foe if he was aroused. But there was a genuine smile on his face as he approached Dan and extended his big hand. "So, this is 21 plus. And he laughed as he said it. "Well, you don't look like anyone to be afraid of." And he laughed even more. "The reports that have come in here have made you sound like some ferocious character that could just eat up anything that crossed your path, but you look like a pretty decent chap." Dan laughed with him and felt at ease almost at once. "Mr. Big," he said, "I am what I am by the grace of God, and if it hadn't been for God's protection, you would have never have gotten the first good report about me. So if I have been able to do anything, please give all the credit to the Lord." Mr. Big tightened his grip on Dan's hand and stood looking directly into his face for what seemed to be a long time, and then, in what must have been a very tender tone for him, said, "Reverend, that is exactly what 35 and the others have told me about you. Several of them have reported that you wanted God to have all of the glory, and I want you to know that I appreciate your spirit. And I join you in saying that if it was not for the Lord, we would have lost this battle long ago. Now sit down and let's really get acquainted." So the preacher and the head of the Bureau, in the company of 35 and another agent, spent more than an hour in friendly conversation and in reviewing 21 Plus's work for the Bureau. Over and over, Mr. Big said, "I wish that we could put you on the payroll so that you and your family would get something out of this. I wish that we could do something in reward for you for what you have done." Then, after more than an hour, he said, "Reverend, our time is up. I must meet my appointments, and you must get back to the preachers' meeting downstairs. But before you go, I want to know, is there anything that you are trying to get done or would like to get done with which we can help you? Just name it, and we will try to do something about it." "Sir, I have not asked for any reward and did not expect any pay. To have been of some small help to my country is all that I ask. 35 told me the risks and the sacrifice before I even started into this, and I am satisfied. All I want is the consciousness that I have done my part." "But, said Mr. Big. "That was before we knew that you were going to get so deeply involved in this thing, or that you were going to be the one to crack so many problems for us. Now we want to do something, but of course it will have to be something for you personally, and something that we can do without exposing your connection with the Bureau. Now tell us, is there anything that you have been working on or trying to buy or need some money to finish?" Dan thought for a moment. This was something that he had not expected, so he was not prepared. After a few moments of reflection, he said, "There are always a lot of things that a preacher needs for his church, and much that he needs for his family, but I don't have any real personal needs at all, unless it would be my school finances." "Well, tell us about that." And Mr. Big motioned for the agent nearby to make notes. "Perhaps we can help on this school thing." "I hate to mention it, sir, but I have been working on my graduate degrees for some time, and when I got involved in the war effort, I just dropped the thing entirely. I was trying to do a little at a time so as not to interfere with my ministry. Much of it has been done by extension, and some by snatches when I could slip into the university. But now I have done nothing in so long and have paid nothing for my bill for 5 years. I am sure that I have been dropped and my account is completely delinquent. I would like to finish sometime." "How much do you lack and what field were you in?" And Mr. Big pressed the question as though he had the solution to it already. "I taught some in high schools where I have pastored in the past, and I like to teach government and civics, so I have been trying to get my master's degree in political science. But I guess that is out now." "Perfect, Reverend, perfect." And Mr. Big seemed all excited about it. "I think we have the answer to that. Get a transcript of your credits and have them sent to me. Then you will get a letter telling you what to do. You can get that master's yet, and then go on to your doctorate also, if you wish. Just do what you are instructed to do, and the bill will be taken care of by a friend of yours. Now I must go, and you must go, so we had better break this up. But wait, is there anything else that I can do for you?" For he had seen a peculiar look on Dan's face. "Yes, sir, there is something else that I would like to do. I have enjoyed this time with you more than I can ever tell, and you can be sure that I will never forget it. But, sir, in my work I never visit and leave people without having prayer with them. Would you mind if I bowed here with you and had a season of prayer?" The big man slipped his arm around Dan's shoulder, and with an affectionate hug, he said sincerely, "I can't think of anything that I would rather have you do than that, and I don't know anyone that I would rather have to pray for me." And together, the head of the Bureau, 2 of his most trusted agents, and the Reverend Spy knelt in the private office of the most revered man in America's legal history, and spent some minutes in earnest prayer to God. When they arose and shook hands all around, there were tears in all eyes, and a bond that was never to be completely broken until death took the fore. Thus it came to pass that some months later, after having completed the prescribed work by extension, the Reverend Daniel Phillips was awarded a master's degree in absentia in political science and received a receipt from the bursar of the university marked simply, "Paid in full." Thus it also came to pass that a short time later he received a communication from another outstanding college, informing him that a friend had offered to pay the cost of his work on his doctor's degree, and that he could pursue the work at his own convenience and in his own manner. And it came to pass that a few years later the same Reverend Daniel Phillips received in absentia the degree of Doctor of Philosophy with a major in biblical literature. Dan never advertised or publicized these facts, for to do so might have revealed something of his work as an intelligence man. And also, he did not work for the degree in order to publicize them, but for the knowledge that he gained. There were other times when nice things were done for Dan, and when gifts of money would come from unexpected sources, and many times unknown sources, and Dan often wondered how his friends at the Bureau knew about his needs. He never forgot the day he spent in Washington at the Bureau, nor the season of prayer in Mr. Big's office.